then the next step after we have sent files to the fabric manufacturer, in our case Benartex and Contempo, which is their modern wing of Benartex, then what happens is that the person called the stylist, who is at Benartex, has special software that they convert our illustrations to a software that is used by the mills, which in our case are in South Korea. So that those files are sent, and printouts are also sent. And there's often a lot of back and forth between our illustrations and the printouts that Benartex produces, and then what we get back from the mill. So this is where the fine-tuning starts to happen. And that fine-tuning is done in the form of what's called strike-offs, or TSOs, textile strike-offs. And the difference between, it's kind of like a rough draft that we get back, the little swatches, sometimes it's maybe a quarter of a yard or half a yard or something like that. And it's an example of what the actual fabric is going to look like. And this is the first time we're actually seeing the designs on fabric. And a lot of times it's in this process that we make changes, especially when it comes to line work. So I pulled out some of our interesting examples from our printology line. And so this was the printology line. And this was hand drawn. So this is what was sent to the mill. And you can see that the lines are not intended to be perfect. We wanted them to be loose and look like they were hand drawn. We weren't looking for a very stiff, rigid sort of design. So let me get you a little bit closer so you can see the details that I'm talking about. So when we started, we sent them a file for this design. And I hadn't really noticed in doing the original designs that there was a lot of difference in the way we drew certain lines. And we thought initially that that would be nice to have some thicker and some slightly thinner. But then when we got the first set of strike-offs, so these are cut down. We keep it just as a kind of document to help us review and answer questions. We keep these strike-offs. And so this is what it looked like when we got it. And at that point, we decided that some of these thicker lines were distracting. And so so what we do at that point is, and usually this is a same day turnaround. We get a FedEx envelope with the strike-offs by 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. And then we have to get them back to, we have to have a conversation with the wonderful folks in New York by 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock at the latest, so they can get back to the people in Korea, so any input we have does not hold up production. So then so we decided at that point that some of these lines just look too thick. So at that point, rather than having a variety of lines, we decided to use one thickness of line and have it be thinner. And so that was the second strike-off. So you can see the difference between the thicker lines and the thinner lines at this point. And then this is what the final fabric looked like. So you can notice how much the lines changed between the first printout of our initial design and the first strike-off that had the heavier lines, and the second strike-off that had the lighter lines, and then the final. Now you'll notice between the second strike-off and the actual production yardage that the lines were even thinner. And that's because when the strike-offs are done, each screen is pulled manually. So it's not as precise as the actual yardage that's done automatically, the production yardage. So strike-offs tend to be a little less precise, a little clumsier, because it all depends on the pressure of the person and how they're pulling the screen that day. So this is how we do it with prints, but it's different when we have yarn dyes. Let me grab some of those right now. I've got them right here. So you can see just how much things change. So in terms of the way we design them is also by printouts initially that are sent to the mill. And for example, and often the colors that look like they're the right colors on our screen don't match the colors that are on this screen that they see in New York or in Korea also. So we had this in mind when we sent it. However, when we got it back, it looked like that. And you can see it's a big difference in the color. So then in that really quick time frame from noon to 1, whenever we get that FedEx envelope of strike-offs, we quickly make notes. And then we, on the phone, will say, okay, in this case, color 6606Y needs to be a lighter pink, for example. And sometimes we'll actually call out, we will give them exact colors, either in Pantone chips or often we really just trust Jessica if we say that fourth orange needs to be a little more pink or a little less yellow, a little more saturated, a little less saturated. She generally knows what we're looking for. But sometimes there are colors that are really tough. And this is an example of a red that we really struggled with. And you can see how many different versions we looked at and how different they look. So this purple we decided was a little too strong. This one we decided was a little bit too tomato. And I'm looking at these and trying to remember, I think this was the one we went with in the end. And so all of this happens, and then we actually get the yardage of the strike-offs. And you can see that is also a totally different color. So we have to look at the files at different stages to see how they're looking. And Bill's got the yardage for me. And then, so this was the sample of the TSO, and they did a pretty good job with this. You can see it's very, very close. And so even though yarn dyes are not printed, each yarn is dyed separately, and that's how the design is produced, you can see that these swatches here are the colors of each yarn that's going to be dyed to create the weave. And so we really have to take this step by step. So when we are doing strike-offs for prints, we're looking at two different things. We're looking at the engraving and whether or not the design is properly structured in the screens and the way that it's actually going to be transferred. And then the second thing we're looking at is color. And those are two different parts of the process. And in yarn dyes, we're looking at the colors of the yarns that are meant to weave, and also the placement of those yarns, because that can change the look of the fabric as well. And you want enough contrast that you can see the the weave itself, but you don't want so much that it looks heavy-handed or it looks too high contrast, because that'll make it harder for people to sew with. So anyway, I will say goodbye and we'll see you tomorrow.